Hi everyone, Dave here at East Rosebud Fly and Tackle, Billings, Montana. Thanks for joining in. I actually had a request from a viewer, it's always nice to know you have a viewer, to explain touch dubbing. Touch dubbing is a very simple method to apply dubbing to a fly. It was actually showcased by Gary LaFontaine. Gary LaFontaine lived in Deer Lodge, Montana, and he published a book in 1981 called Caddisflies. Gary was probably the preeminent researcher of our times. He spent thousands and thousands of hours underwater in scuba gear studying these flies, studying how the fish reacted to them, trying different materials, etc., etc. So what we know about caddisflies today, we owe to Gary and his research and his book. But touch dubbing is a method that he used for his sparkle pupa. He used this for the abdomen. I will tie a variation of that one of these times and show you. But basically, touch dubbing is just using extra sticky dubbing wax. So instead of direct dubbing, twirling the dubbing with your fingers on the thread, you actually use a special dubbing wax. Now there are several out there on the market. There are a couple that I can recommend and one that I don't. The one that I don't is by Wapsi. It's basically a petroleum-based product. So it's not tacky, it's just greasy. Sorry Wapsi, but I call them like I see them. Two that are very good, Hareline makes a touch dub wax that is acceptable. The premier touch dubbing wax is the Wonder Wax, Overton's. It's very expensive, unfortunately, but you don't use very much of it, and it is very good wax for this purpose. Now with touch dub wax, the purpose is not to get it on your fingers, because it is very, very tacky, just to get it on the thread itself. So the difference between touch dubbing and regular dubbing. Here is a fly that was dubbed direct dubbing. We're just going to do a bead head, gold-ribbed hare's ear. Nice and clean and tight, but not very fishy looking. Here is the same fly, same materials, using the touch dubbing method. You can see it's much fuzzier, much hairier, much more alive underwater, and it traps lots of air bubbles. So this is what I'll show you today. I'm going to be using turkey quill for the wing case. People have a lot of problems with turkey quill splitting. I do too. A couple of ways to help prevent that is, one, you can use an artist fixative. It's basically a vinyl spray. Mist your feather with that. Helps to keep the barbules together. They still split when you bring the wing case over. Something else I'm going to show you, you maybe never heard of before. It's called tear tape. It's made by Scotch. It's a packaging tape, but it's meant to be able to be teared by hand, like so. So you don't need scissors, anything like that. I'm actually going to put a slip of turkey quill on this material, cut it out, and then we'll use that for our wing case. All right, let's get down to business here. All right, what I'm using is just a simple nymph hook. This is a size 12, 1X long nymph hook. This is a size 7/64 natural brass Cyclops bead. And I've just got some 8/0 brown Veevus thread. So we'll start off with some thread. No, we won't. I'm going to show you a very easy way to cut slips that are hook gap width, which is standard for a wing case, is to have a slip that's hook gap width. Simply take your feather, you have your hook in your vise, place the quill up against the shank of the hook, pierce the hook point, and draw the feather back. And now you have a slip that's perfect hook gap. It's a very easy way to do that. I'm going to do it a little bit differently. This has been sprayed with the artist fixative. So if I put the tear tape on it at this point, I can't realign those fibers. So I'm going to use a non-sprayed feather And these are secondary feathers, the nice full ones. And I want my wing case to be a little bit wider so that I can trim the tape off of it. And to do that, all I have to do is press it up against a little bit, put a little pressure on this so that when I cut this slip, it's just a little fatter than I really need. Pull that away, trim that off. Okay, now you see it has a natural curve to it. Because it hasn't been treated, these individual barbs are actually held together by little Velcro-like tabs called barbules. So you can take this feather and carefully massage this so that these are now nice and straight. Okay, you can't do that if you put fixative on it first. When you take a little bit of this tear tape, and I'm going to put the shiny side or the underside of the feather onto the tear tape. Simply lay it on there like so, and when it's time to use it, we'll trim it out from around there. All right, now we'll start the thread. The bead is already on the hook. Don't worry too much. You could put a few wraps of lead wire on this if you wanted a weighted nymph and trap this bead against the front of the hook. I like to fish a floating nymph like this, particularly when I touch dub it, because as I said earlier, it really does like to trap air bubbles. And if you use it as a floating nymph and fish it right in the surface film, it's really a very effective fly. Not a lot of people fish a floating nymph. They think they always have to be on the bottom. But remember, when the insect emerges from the bottom, before they actually transform into the adult, they look just like the nymph. I'm just using mallard flank for the tail. You could use any type of soft hackle, hen, partridge, anything you want. You can even use a pinch of rabbit fur from the pole or the center of the mask. And I want a piece that's a little wider than hook gap, a little fuller tail than that. Simply stroke the fibers away from the quill and strip them off. Now this fly imitates mostly the crawler nymph family, so the tail is not all that long. I'm going to make it about 3/4 of a hook shank in length. Tie that on the back. Wrap forward, and then we can help use this material to trap the bead against the eye of the hook. All right, a material that you don't see used very much anymore because we have wire, the ultra wire, is plain old oval gold tinsel. This is what we used to use in the past. It still works very well. It's not quite as durable as wire, but it has a nice effect, and it's a traditional material on the gold-ribbed hare's ear. This is a size small, oval gold. Tie this in so that it's on the far side of the hook. We're going to rib it in a conventional manner, all the way to the bait of the tail. Now when I touch dub, I like to go in both directions. I like to go back and then forward. It gives me extra thread wraps to make sure that I have that dubbing secured. So I'm going to come up to about where the wing case is going to be tied in. Now for dubbing, I make my own dubbing from hare's masks. This is from the margins of the hare's ears, from the cheeks, anywhere but the middle. I also add a little finely chopped clear Antron yarn to it. Gives it a little bit of sparkle. When you direct dub natural fur like this, it's very easy to mat it. That's what you get here when you direct dub. You don't get many fibers sticking out. It's just almost impossible not to do it any other way. So all I'm going to do, this is the Overton wax. To prevent getting a lot of clumps of wax on your thread, don't expose much wax. All I'm going to do is bring my thread down 3 or 4 inches, give it a couple swipes of this wax. Simply going to get the dubbing, and a little bit at a time, I'm simply going to press it against the back of the thread. You can dub this as heavily or as finely as you want to. Some people advocate twisting the thread a little bit as you dub it to make sure that the material sticks on the thread, but if you cover it well, I really don't have an issue with that. So you see, I'm dubbing it pretty finely. I'm trying to center the dubbing on the thread. I don't like to dub any more than about 3 or 4 inches at a time. It's just harder to control. And I'm going to start wrapping it, get a couple of wraps secured, and then as I wrap back, you can see that I'm wrapping over the dubbing as I go. Make sure that I'm all the way to the base of the tail. And I'm going to start wrapping forward. Now as I go forward, I'm going to preen this dubbing back a little bit to make sure I've got it captured. Add a little more wax. A little more dubbing. And we'll continue to dub forward. Again, just kind of pulling this back to make sure that we've got good thread coverage on it. And I think you can immediately see the difference in that fly. Then we'll take our oval tinsel, just make 3 or 4 wraps on it. Not only gives it the segmentation, but helps to secure the material. Bring this all the way up to the thread. A couple of tight wraps here. And remove the excess. Now remember, anytime you're making a wing case, you must come back over the dubbed abdomen before you tie the wing case in. If you don't, you're going to have a crack of no material between the wing case and the abdomen. So I'm simply going to bring my thread back, not quite to the halfway point. So we come back to our slip here. I'm just going to trim the tape away from the quill. Or the slip, pardon me. If your scissors are nice and sharp like they should be, this cuts very easily. Get our scissors in here and slide them. And cut that off. Trim that a little bit closer. That's why I like to make it a little wider than I need it. That way I don't have any tape showing. Now when you use a turkey slip, you want to make sure that you use the tip of the feather. If you look at this slip that I outlined before, if you look at the quill or the slip when it's close to the quill, the fibers are very large. They're laid like Venetian blind. The fibers are large and they're kind of punky. If you tie it in here, this is going to split. There's just no way around it. So when you tie in your slip, you want to make sure you're using the finer tips of the quill when you tie it in. So I want the shiny side down so that when I turn this over for the wing case, the nice colored side will be up. Excuse me, I want the shiny side up. So I have the tip here. I'm going to trim it back a little bit just to square it up. So the shiny side, the tape side is up. Now this tape is slick, slicker than normal quill. So you want to get a nice loose wrap around there. Pull down, try to encircle that hook nice and evenly with this. And then make several tight wraps as we go forward. All right. Now for the thorax, I'm still using Hare's mask dubbing, but this comes from the pole, the very center of the mask. It's a little bit darker, and remember these nymphs, when they're ready to hatch, the wing case is very dark on them. The thorax is darker, plus the pole has more guard hairs, so it's a little spikier in appearance than the cheeks. And again, I blend this myself with a little bit of Antron. So once again, I'm going to dub back and then dub forward again, 2 layers. Just a little bit of wax on there. I like to dub the thorax a little heavier than I do the abdomen, so we'll simply apply a little more dubbing to it. Couple of wraps right behind the bead. Start wrapping back, make sure we have this trapped. I know it looks like a bad hair day right now, but it'll clean up. But you really want to avoid getting this dubbing wax on your fingers. It is very, very tacky. So we want to make sure we're all the way at the back of our wing case. And come all the way to the bead. Comb that back a little bit. Now when I bring this over, again the tape side is down, so you see the natural coloration of the quill. Again, this is optional. It just adds to the durability of the fly, the wing case. Once again, we want a soft wrap to encompass that, to make sure that it wraps all the way around the hook. A couple more tight wraps. Trim that. And if you're doing a series of these, of course you can measure out a dozen or so slips for your wing case. Lay out a piece of tape and lay them in there side by side, and then cut them out as you need them. Make sure we have that down. And then whip finish. Pull that nice and tight to make sure you've got that wing case secured. So if you've ever noticed that the more you fish a fly and the more fish it catches, the better it fishes, that's because it's getting a little more ragged and getting buggier looking. So why waste the time? You can just make it buggier looking right from the beginning by just using touch dubbing. And this dubbing is in there very well with the double wraps going back and then forward. The dubbing's not going to come out of there on you. So if you haven't tried touch dubbing, give it a try. The only difference is just getting the right type of wax, and you have several choices there. Classic, gold bead, gold rib, hare's ear. And whoever asked for me to do this, I appreciate it. If you have any other suggestions or any other needs, please don't hesitate to let us know. Thanks for joining in. I'll see you next time.